Hello, everyone. We will be starting in a moment. Please let me know in the chat if you can hear me clearly. We'll do a quick sound check and video check. Perfect. Thank you very much for the confirmation. So I see many people are joining us now. Feel free to introduce yourself. Let us know where you're from. And I believe it's your second lecture for today. So hopefully you've been here also yesterday and for the first lecture of today. And I hope you're really enjoying the event. Good. So let's start with the introduction. So hello, everyone, and welcome to our session on preparation and challenges companies need to take into account in 2024. We're glad you're joining us for this session, which is part of our 3-day Beyond Compliance event. My name is Jan Kugel, the Managing Director at Qualistry, and I will be your moderator for today's session. I'm here today with Robert, Fenton, Kelly, Stanton, and Darwin Shurik, who will be your subject matter experts and speakers at this session. Please take into account that the session will be recorded and you will receive an email from Qualio within several days. And if you don't and you want to have the recording, please don't hesitate to reach out to the Qualio team. A bit about the system. So on the right hand side of your screen, you'll see options for how to engage with your speakers. Please go ahead and introduce yourself as you have already been doing. And we encourage you to ask questions throughout the event. Please use the Q&A section for this so that we don't lose your questions. And we will try to address them directly or at the end of the session. And before I hand you over to our speakers for 2024 prep session, I want to say a huge thank you to our co-sponsor of this 3-day event, Qualio. Qualio is a quality management platform designed to help life science companies achieve regulatory compliance and operational excellence through a comprehensive suite of solutions and services. A real pleasure working with them on this event. And now to our incredible speakers for this session. The first speaker is Robert Fenton. He is the founder and CEO of Qualio. Prior to founding Qualio in 2012, Robert studied pharmacy for 5 years at the University College Cork, practiced as a community pharmacist, and spent time in quality and R&D roles at global pharmaceutical companies such as Pfizer and Leo Pharma. Our second speaker for today is Kelly Stanton. She has built and over 20 years of pharmaceutical and medical device quality leadership experience working with quality teams at Abbott, Sandoz, Cochlear, and more. She's now the head of quality systems improvement for international CDMO giant Corden Pharma. And the third speaker that will be joining us today is Darwin, who has 30 years of clinical background as a respiratory therapist, gaining experience in medical device, diagnostic, distribution, ventilation, and sleep therapy organizations before entering the entrepreneurial world of talent management. He has founded Shurik Solutions, Inc., an executive recruiting firm for medical device and pharmaceutical companies. So I would like to welcome our speakers that will be talking about funding and capital, quality and regulatory, and talent and recruitment, and how it all comes together in pharma. So please take the stage.
Thank you for the great introduction. I'm honored to be the first person of the three of us to chat today. I'll say that we're three big topics together, and I like the fact that we're bringing them all in one session. If you think about what it takes to start, grow a business, there were three things that matter more than a lot of others. And one is you have the capital to fund R&D, support getting your first products to market, pursue new markets that cost money. This is often a capital intensive business when getting started. Second of all is your products have got to be safe and effective. You have to prove that, maintain that, and use that to secure and maintain your approvals to sell. And the last part is, which I'm really glad Darwin is here to talk about this, people are the real engine of all of our businesses. And we think we're a life sciences business, medical devices, a software company like Qualia, but we're all a people business. And as we always have been, we always will be. And that has to be a central component. It's like the foundational pillar for every company's success. Yeah. For my section, I get to talk about capital, which is, I think, really fun. Let's maybe kind of dive in. So what's it like raising capital today? Oh, just lost our slides.
Right. So I will let Kelly now
Yeah,
share
awesome. I think Kelly's
her
driving.
slide.
In any case, I can dive right in, right? And when it comes to capital, it is no surprise, but we live in interesting times right now from a capital raising perspective. It's tricky right now versus the last 3 years, of course, to raise capital. I might say we're more reverting to historical norms, maybe slightly overcorrected, but it is way more difficult right now for companies to raise capital. Markets are down, like particularly in like biotech. We're seeing IPOs, not performing, being pulled and held off. VC return investments are not returning like expectations. We're seeing investors be way more conservative and swarming after smaller number of incredibly high quality deals. And interest rates are making borrowing really, really expensive. And we're seeing a lot of this in our personal lives with things like interest rates. And professionally, we're seeing this as well. And this is a really big area of concern for a lot of people. Everybody's aware broadly of these challenges. What I might focus on in our industry for us, what are some key things that we really want to watch? And the first thing I'll call out is the patent cliff. Patents are expiring across this decade, and that brings huge opportunity, but also some competition. And it's really important we're aware of what's happening here. I think it's 200 billion in annual revenue at risk with some companies right now. An example of some of that is, AbbVie saw a 31% drop in Humira sales in 2023 as 9 non-patent biosimilars emerged. We're seeing a lot more of this come, and it's an opportunity for those companies finding these spaces to create, but it's also for companies who have these patents in the market. It's huge risk for them. The second thing I'll focus on is drug prices. In the United States, we've had the Inflation Reduction Act passed, and we're seeing the Biden administration take aggressive steps to lower drug prices. And this might even be seasonings with like a margin proposal that I think was published or made in December of last year. We're also seeing FTC scrutiny really ramp up. And I saw a figure shared by our team during research where approximately 4x the increase in filing time for M&As. It's making the diligence process a lot more complicated, and essentially it's making it much harder to do M&A deals. And M&A is a huge driver of this industry. A lot of companies get to a certain stage and get acquired. And if it's harder to do M&A deals, it's really affecting things like biopartnering transactions as well. The last thing is, look, interest rates, belts are tightening. Money is not as available as it once was. And what that often translates to is you always needed to be a very promising company to raise capital, but that aperture has narrowed even further now. And it's only the standout companies who have, clear ability to outstrip the pack are getting rewarded with funding. So that's my bad news. And I guess key things to watch. I will say that, it's not all bad. And within every challenge, there is an opportunity. That can be like a tired phrase at times, but it's actually true. And I can show you through some of those right now. The first thing is, if you look at some reasons for optimism, if valuations are falling, or some might argue reverting to rational valuations, well, that means deal volumes can increase. So more deals might get done as this trend continues throughout the year. The other thing I'll say is that we're seeing, with things like the patent cliff coming in, companies are hungry to feed their R&D pipelines, which which we believe will lead to an increase in early stage investments and things like portfolio broadening, and could be really good for startups and scale ups who are paying close attention to what's happening with expiring patents and changes in how companies are thinking about protecting their bottom lines and creating growth opportunities for themselves. We're also seeing opportunities in areas like we call it creative collaborations and co-commercializations. Because there is more risk and uncertainty in industry, companies are being more creative to find ways to protect risk and spread their attention across a broader portfolio approach. Again, that's a big area of opportunity for earlier growth stage companies who are nimble and are able to move way more quickly than traditional, big biotech, big pharma. The last thing is, inflation in the United States looks like it's getting under some form of control, which is good news because it may translate to lower interest rates. And if we see lower interest rates, well, that could cause capital to become more available again, and that's really awesome news. So these are some reasons for optimism, and something I'll take forward and maybe investigate in a bit more detail is something that we've believed for a long time at Qualio, which is really around this collaboration and co-commercialization. I've always believed that we live in a collaborative world in life sciences, and in real terms, what I mean by that is that if you actually look at the industry, how it works, how it creates value is changing, and it's now becoming dominated by collaboration. This idea that products are created, developed, brought to market by a village, not by any one tightly vertically integrated monolith. And that brings challenges and opportunities, many of what we care deeply about solving at Qualio. But for this perspective, doing this allows companies to move more quickly. It allows them to reduce their risk. It allows them also to manage the cost base in their businesses as well, because they can share that amongst partners. And we kind of call this like the days of in-house slow science are now over. And this is an incredible opportunity for newer companies, smaller, nimbler, faster moving companies in this space. Some stats, Bristol Myers Squibb, first example here, I think it is 80% of their portfolio was made externally. And for Pfizer and Merck, two other big names, it's like 75% of this portfolio coming from external companies and external R&D sources. This is a really, really, really big opportunity for companies. And I think this is something that's going to be more and more the norm of the world that we're living in. Kind of taking that, a step forward, if these are all opportunities and people are exploiting this and we see how much of this partnership is going on, well, this is not a secret, and it's leading to also a more collaborative world, which is also very competitive. And a couple of stats here again, and I'm sorry for up and down with good news, bad news in what I'm walking you through here, but it's important to understand that, challenges and opportunities come kind of in pairs, and you can make the best decisions when you understand both sides. There's a lot of deals being done by a small number of funds. Those companies who launched and raised capital in the COVID boom area, that's causing trouble right now. So thinking carefully about how you position yourself, I think, is really important. And we're also seeing differences in attitudes or risk tolerance between Europe and the United States in particular. Now, what does that mean for your funding options? And I think this is the most important thing to cover today is we have 7 different funding options up here, which we think for 90% of companies, one or more of these will be the right option for you. I know that I'm running out of time here a little bit, so I'll go through these pretty quickly. Questions can come up if people want to probe in more detail. But I will say that one of the things that's really interesting is the rise of accelerators. And if we think about the innovation life cycle in life sciences as the barrier to entry is coming down, and the speed to market is generally going up in the industry, we're seeing accelerators become more and more popular. And these are short-term focused sprints where in exchange for equity, you get a bunch of advice and resources. An example would be Y Combinator, which is an accelerator that spawned some of the world's most successful technology companies at scale, is now making huge investments in biotech. And there's a lot of examples around the world emerging. That's often now becoming an entry point for a lot of companies that's actually realistic. Next to that, we have our incubators. These have been around for a little bit longer. And typically these are often like a follow-on. They're longer term, they're in exchange for a fee, and can help provide that extra support, on the path to actually getting to market. Next to that, we get more traditional, right, which is the classic funding path of venture capital. It's always been a very popular option. I will say that it's one that companies often pursue as a default. Maybe it shouldn't be the path for every company. I think most companies are not venture-backed companies by their nature in terms of where they are, where they want to get to. Always encouraged to really think carefully and de-risk as much as possible before we go down that path, which is what makes things like accelerators and incubators really, really valuable test labs to figure out what kind of business you have, what opportunity you have. Because when you make commitments to venture capital, you're putting yourself on a certain path as a business, and you always want to maintain control of the path you're on. And next to that, we have angels. When I was in Ireland, there was a lot of life science angel networks moving over to the San Francisco Bay Area. There's a lot of life sciences focused angel networks. This is one of the core first stops for people in this space. And it's often a really good one because in exchange for investment and equity, you bring in the village concept of smart people who can help you make the right decisions and avoid the wrong decisions. They're the four kind of key things that I often see companies pursue. And beneath that, of course, we have joint ventures where companies will get investment from a strategic. We have SPACs, which became really popular over the last few years, and I think might have become less popular again. Typically for later stage companies, they're recommended. And of course, we have probably the most traditional of all of them, which is academia. Research PhDs spinning out into products. That's always something that's going to be really important. Knowing they're all the paths, I'll say that there's 5 quick tips I'll give for people who are thinking about which one to choose and how that works. The first is you really need to understand your audience, and that determines often where you want to go. Is it what size check? How much money do you need to raise? Okay, that will tell you immediately what type of source you should go to. What's their sector interest? That actually matters so much, because that's how you pique somebody's interest. And it's the first thing I see people doing this for the first time where, well, actually, let's start there and work backwards. You'll end up narrowing your options to high potentials way, way quicker. Next one is, like I said, don't rely on venture on its own. Your job is to control your destiny and take risk out of the business. If you believe this is the right path for you, you absolutely go for it. But there are so many other options you can take and build an incredible business. The third one I'll give is, crowdfunding is interesting. Became really popular. People who've had success there, but from a dollar and time return, I would typically say if one of the other 7 options can work for you, what I have seen personally is that they're typically a better return and give you a lot more control. There's a lot of risk, and it can be hard to get your cap table right. People might disagree on that, but that's at least my stance from spending a lot of time in this industry. The second last is to think about your partnering strategy really, really carefully. Working with big brand name CROs and CMOs might make you think you can position yourself for funding, but actually you might not get the A team, you might not get the time and attention, and you might miss your go-to-market deadlines as a result. I've seen that happen. Last month, I talked to 2 companies where that happened. And working with a small company that's not as well known might actually help you accelerate your velocity faster. So it's really important, because when people are investing in you, they want to understand, do they fit with the thesis? What's the chances of return? And one of the ways to think about chances of return are how well are you executing against your milestones? And in this industry, everything comes down to milestones. And the last thing I'll say is that from my personal journey at Qualio and all my peers that I know well is you succeed when you stack the deck, market, team, progress, your audience, you come prepared and you run a process. It's not conversations. It's I'm running a process. This is my number one job. And you want to be the conversation at the end of the day. And you're like, wow, this team just had everything. And I would encourage people to think about that. How can you make yourself look like the full package? And I would say more than look like the full package. How do you make sure that you're filling these gaps right now, even if it's a year or two before you're raising capital? Because the things they're looking for are also highly correlated to the things you need to actually build a winning company. I believe I've used up all my time, so I will pass on to Kelly.
Thank you, Robert. Before we go to quality and regulatory, we have a question. What are your thoughts regarding linking industry and academia through FDA BAA? Are you familiar with it?
I haven't been involved in that. There might be somebody else who has more direct experience. Please feel free to speak up. I'm always very careful not to speak outside my areas of expertise.
Okay. If we don't have anybody who can give an answer to that, I also have a question to you that may connect both sides of the fence. So do you have any particular quality signals or indicators that investors might look for? And how can the quality teams do anything to maximize the chance of investment or acquisition, merger and acquisition?
I can give a really quick primer to that from the quality team perspective is, well, first is it goes back to our roundtable, the partnership model, and this idea of quality as a partner in success and driving velocity. Another thing I'll say is that I mentioned plan your outsourcing carefully, control of supply chain, and the ability for the company to use that to its like velocity of product quality goals is absolutely incredibly important. And that's something where often the quality teams have a lot of control, right? Whether it's quality agreements, whether it's primary backup vendors, when it's really making sure you've aligned the how do we get this product to market successfully model. That's something where quality teams just have a big role and often don't get the recognition. But I do think that when people bring this up, it really does support them, and people care a lot. It's a huge area of expertise they can bring. People might have more.
That's kind of a good, well, both of these questions, it's a good segue into the next section, but I'll just say quickly, I often like to say you've got to slow down now to speed up later. If you don't have a solid regulatory strategy and you don't map that well and map your capital milestones to some of those items of spend, you can get all the way to the end, throw your submission to the agency, and the agency will say, nope, you missed these major things, go back. And that's death to those small companies, right? Like you don't make it the first time through. That's where so many great products get shelved, right? The company doesn't make it. And especially in these times where capital is tight, or clinical trials go to die, frankly, right? Because you didn't write a good protocol. Or the other one I see all the time is people make changes in their products and then don't consider how that change to their product or that change to their manufacturing process actually invalidates the data they just generated. And now they have to go do it again, right? It's a waste of your precious capital. And so, to both of these questions, some of those challenges around cuts to the staff and not having the right tools in place, considering all of that in your planning, the due diligence that your, savvy investors are going to look at those kinds of things. And that really demonstrates to your investors that you actually know what you're doing to get the product to market. To me, it's a selling point, but I'm also biased because I'm a quality professional. So you should leverage those things to sell your, we know what we're doing to develop this product. So, yeah.
Right. Perfect. And I think this, we have a great question from Becky that really connects what Robert was talking in with the regulatory part. So she says that in her experience, the first thing to be cut off is the RA, QA, the software and the people. And what can RA, QA professionals can do, and how can they communicate to the upper management their importance of quality and to help them maintain the resources?
Yeah, I think you have to go back to that regulatory pathway and the requirements to actually get it to the finish line. Now, you may not have all the resources that you need. It might get tight. I think sometimes people, it depends on where you come from too, right? We're used to having big QA teams. You might become a QA team of one. But if the processes are layered in properly and well from the beginning, it'll support the overall speed to market. You'll get there faster. You won't be redoing it later and spending more money to redo it later.
I have to jump in and piggyback off of that. Was a great answer by Kelly, but one way you remind your leadership is go back. It doesn't matter whether it's stage 3 clinical trial failures, clinical efficacy, whether it's submissions, whether it's FDA warning letters. Almost all of the reasons come back to wrong leadership, wrong talent, or cutting corners. So if you're not making regulatory and quality a key aspect of your strategy moving forward, you're just setting yourself up for risk. And back to what Kelly said, redoing things, wasting resources, the things that don't lead to sustainable, profitable growth. And obviously, if you're paying fines and that affects the attitude of your culture and your value prop in the marketplace.
Yeah, a good regulatory strategy will get you through that submission process the first time, and you will have to pay to submit again. And those fees are not cheap. So, it feels a little bit like selling insurance, but, the paying to submit it again is where, you're going to save later. And again, the timelines, as Rob talked about, hitting those key milestones, proving to that investor, the tranches of capital are tied to you hitting your milestones as you go through your development processes, your clinical trial processes, et cetera. I think people who have great ideas, especially the ones that come out of academia, right? Those guys have great, amazing ideas for curing, diseases or new medical device inventions. They don't always understand the pathway to get it into market. And that's where, as a quality and regulatory professional, helping them understand that navigating those pathways means, having someone in that staff or a consultant, right? That's part of your budget, and that's all got to be transparent to your investors. These things are critical for getting that product through the pathway and into the market.
Right. Thank you, Kelly. So I think we'll revert to the other questions later. So feel free to continue with your talk.
All right. Awesome. So quality and regulatory, jumping into a little bit of what we're seeing and what we expect through 2024. Lots of exciting things, but I think some of it also is looking back. Drug shortages continue to be a major topic this year. They're a lingering, damaging threat to patients and the status quo of the industry. It's something the regulatory agencies around the world are still very focused on, and they expect the industry to continue to respond to them. The agency noted, the FDA noted 305 continuing drug shortages at their 2023 PDA-FDA Joint Regulatory Conference. And this isn't, a new problem. We saw this at the height of COVID, and it continues to be a challenge. And it was their 2019 Interagency Drug Shortages Report, which birthed the concept of their upcoming Quality Management Maturity Program, which we heard about yesterday. I won't repeat that, but the recording of yesterday's session is available to anyone who didn't attend that. Again, we continue to monitor this. There are 40 to 50 new shortages that have sprung up in the United States like clockwork across the last 5 years. Unsurprisingly, the 2019 report was followed up in 2022 by the FDA's draft guidance around risk management plans to mitigate the potential for drug shortages. The agency is really paying attention to this. This has a massive impact on patients. And, again, in the situation where a patient requires, these life-sustaining products, obviously it's a huge problem for them. A key requirement of this guidance was the recommendation for stakeholders and key actors in the supply chain to build and collaborate on risk management plans. These supply chain risk management plans should consider, evaluate, and mitigate supply risks to insulate the broader supply chain from the risk of shortages. These guidances remain in draft, but I expect certainly to hear more about it in 2024 as the FDA continues to fixate on this shortage problem. And this ties very tightly into, of course, their very tight scrutiny around supply chain and managing those issues. Part of the shortage problem continues to be amplified by low industry engagement with the drug amount reporting that was required by the 2020 CARES Act. Despite federal requirements for manufacturers to make an annual report of manufactured product volumes to the FDA, these pitiful engagement levels of around 25% of NDCs in the Act's first year have steadily declined to less than 20% since. So I do expect the agency to continue focus here. On top of all of this, a key regulatory requirement for American pharmaceutical companies that goes live later this year is the Drug Supply Chain Security Act. This was originally launched in 2013 by President Obama, which mandated end-to-end drug traceability requirements at the package level to further insulate against drug supply disruption. The act was scheduled for enforcement in November of 2023 before being delayed to a final enforcement date of November 27th, 2024. This recent regulatory nail-biting about supply chain risk isn't restricted to just the US, however. In 2023, the EU proposed its new human medicines regulation. It suggests that future marketing authorization holders should build and maintain a shortage prevention plan for any product they place on the European market. A critical medicines alliance of national authorities, manufacturers, civil society representatives, and EU agencies is expected to go live in early 2024 with a possible Critical Medicines Act to follow. And a new EU regulation, 2022/123, is going live in early 2025, which gives the EMA a new role to monitor and protect medicinal supplies. A new European Shortages Monitoring Platform, or ESMP, will go live at the same time. So again, global focus on making sure that we are protecting our supply chains in order to ensure patients are receiving the drugs that they need. Between 2021 and 2023, we saw new manufacturing models starting to really take off. The UK, EU, and US all proposed models of a new decentralized point of care manufacturing. The objective, to build an operational framework for short life medicines and therapies to be produced at the point of care, such as a hospital or clinic, allowing treatments to be administered rapidly with no delivery and storage phase. And this really is us being driven by a lot of things, but part of it is to support some of these new exciting drugs that are coming out that have transport challenges, right? So a lot of these cell and gene therapy products have to have crazy cold chain storage requirements, right? So if we decentralize manufacturing, we can support some of these great new therapies. These distributed just-in-time sites would be connected by an overarching control site responsible for regulatory liaison and creation of documents like a master file. This is a major industry shakeup which won't come into fruition in 2024, but should come further into focus. And we're going to see a lot, I think, continuing to change in industry around this. Point of care manufacturing isn't the only industry innovation gathering pace. Decentralized clinical trials are also being explored. And I feel like COVID also really gave us the push here to consider this as an option. Decentralized clinical trials are, again, from a push around COVID, the FDA has in recent years published both its framework for the use of digital health technologies in drug and biological product development and decentralized clinical trials for drugs, biological products, and device guidance for industry, investigators, and other stakeholders. Again, those are recent publications you should check out if you're heading into the clinical trial space. But this perspective model is currently being hamstrung in both the US and EU by clashing of federal and state requirements. So there'll still be a lot of conversation there. In the EU, clinical sites are only authorized to deliver experimental trial drugs to patients within the same national territory, while in the States, direct to patient trial drug delivery is classed as a pharmacy dispensing activity, forcing trial operators to register as out-of-state pharmacy bodies before DCTs can begin. This brings a whole slew of pharmacy requirements to integrate into your regular pharmaceutical quality system operations, blocking many from being able to realistically take part. DCTs are one to watch for the future then, but we expect that the regulatory landscape will require some tweaking in 2024 to make them realistic operational prospects. POC manufacturing and decentralized trials are still in the theoretical stage, but gradually finding favor in multiple key markets as a way to deliver more agile, personalized therapeutics. Decentralizing operations and moving trial and medicinal therapy delivery closer to the patient, we should imagine would also help tackle the supply chain and shortage issues we noted before, while bringing new quality challenges to tackle. Keep an eye on development in this space, particularly if you're involved in especially compatible areas we talked about, like cell therapy, gene therapy type manufacturing. And then the big hot topic, data integrity. Don't feel like I can emphasize this one enough. We used to talk about document, document, document. Now, of course, with so many things going electronic, data integrity, digital, digital, digital. If you aren't familiar with Alcoa Plus, man, you better get up to speed on that one in a hurry. We've got a long way to go in industry, but man, this one is absolute key. Straight from the PICS guidance, the degree to which data are complete, consistent, accurate, trustworthy, and reliable, and that these characteristics of the data are maintained throughout the data lifecycle, so important. You can read every day about the agency doing an inspection in some facility somewhere in the world where they are questioning the integrity of data that's generated. I cannot emphasize enough how important this is to understand these concepts.
Kelly, to jump on this data integrity topic, we have an interesting question from Sandra, who is saying that the FDA said during their digital transformation symposium that they will be investing heavily in AI, and she's curious how Qualio and the industry for itself, like biotech, pharma, and medtech, will be using AI. And we all hear about LLMs, large language models like ChatGPT, how this will be implemented in the near future.
That's an interesting question. I've heard tell of people using ChatGPT models to write regulatory submissions. And I think there are areas where that can be appropriate. There are places in submissions where it's very much canned language, right? At the same time, I think at the end, you still have to have a human who knows that product well enough to be able to vet the things that the AI model comes back with. The other thing that's interesting about AI models, I think, is that the data sets you use to train it are key, right? The AI itself, the algorithms there, they kind of are what they are. What's really, really important is how you train that. What data do you use to train it? And then, Rob or Darwin, I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on this one and what you guys are looking into here from a quality systems perspective.
Traceability is huge. Everything comes back to traceability, and I think it's going to be, it gets more and more interesting is with the metaverse and AI, how these technologies come out to create more progressive scenarios of where your risk is and making sure you're in compliance. But it's obviously incredibly important from a risk standpoint and being able to grow.
Definitely. All right, well, thanks for that question, Jan. To roll back into the inspection trends and data integrity, back in the day, the agency used to come in, they'd walk through, they would ask for, 5 batch records, they would review all of your data outputs, look for issues, try to trace your processes that way. We as a company got to choose what we showed them or what we didn't as starting points. If there were PCs involved, they might dig into those, they might not anymore. That has changed. They are really based on industry monitoring. The agency is now kind of no longer, we want to see 5 batch records. They're diving straight into systems. They're going straight to weak spots that they know we have, and we all know what those are. They're anywhere you're transferring data, anywhere you're collecting data, they'll go straight to that and want to see how you're going about that. They may see 10 to 25 systems in a single inspection. They're choosing their own targets, especially around laboratory data systems. And again, once across the industry, they're seeing trends over and over with issues around that, then that's what they're going to focus on for a while. So, and then the other thing that's interesting too is, they're going to look at the past, since the last time they were in your plant. So if they were in your plant for the last 3 years, they're going to ask to see your data from the last 3 years out of your laboratory systems. So some light reading for 2024, ISPE, and for you device people, do not ignore it just because it's the International Society for Pharmaceutical Engineering. GAMP, you need to get familiar with this one. This is so important. GAMP has been keeping up and producing excellent guidances around computerized systems, risk management, et cetera, data integrity. So these are some great guidances that have all been updated in the last 2 years that you're going to want to read, get familiar with, update your internal procedures for sure, around data integrity, manufacturing records, your computerized systems management, etc. These are great readings for that. PDA, Parenteral Drug Association, has also come out with new technical reports on data integrity management in the laboratories as well as manufacturing operations. And again, device guys, don't ignore these. The different divisions of the agency, they do talk to each other, and the international organizations, EMA, they're going to follow on. And these guidances are recognized outside the US. So these are important even outside the United States. Bioforum has some good data integrity for IT in the biopharmaceutical industry. Just because it's IT doesn't mean it's out of scope. You're more in scope than ever, whether you want to be or not. These aren't just business systems anymore. And as far as compliance trends to watch, this is a great slide. I love my marketing guy. He does some amazing digging on these things. Where are pharmaceutical businesses going wrong with your quality systems activities? A key message from the FDA at the PDA-FDA Joint Conference in late 2023 was laser focus on manufacturing quality and CGMP adherence, causing other adjacent quality issues to go unnoticed and unfixed. So environmental monitoring, raw material controls and testing, aseptic technique, laboratory controls and stability. And these are, big buckets that the agency is writing their 483s against. I promise you there are data integrity issues in every one of these buckets. How the data is collected and managed behind this comes into play in every one of these problems. Other, so again, compliance trends to watch. Again, environmental monitoring, that is absolutely key. How is your facility built? How are you protecting your product from raw material all the way through finished goods leaving your facility? Contaminations, 3 of the 5 most recalled products from 2016 to 2020 were triggered by nitrosamines and methanol contaminations. You guys, we've got to be looking for these things and making sure that we're testing all the way back through your supply chains. Main mistakes to avoid. For interest of time, I won't get into too much detail here, but all of these smack of supply chain issues, data integrity issues, making sure your quality systems are solid, that you're monitoring across all of your processes so that you can see these issues. Hopefully before, if you've got good metrics in place, you'll see these things before they pop up and become too much of a problem. And with that, I think we are going to roll over into Darwin and talent and recruitment, because as Rob said, people are absolutely key in all of this.
Thank you so much. Hats off to Rob and Kelly. Just great job. And as Rob said, why do they have somebody on here talking about talent recruitment? I'm really excited to be here and to be able to talk about it. First of all, it's hard. It's not easy to do. I didn't necessarily myself do it well in corporate America. Companies struggle with it. Most of us are not trained in the process. And it's not easy for companies that do this for a living for other companies to hire for themselves as well. So it's obviously a very important topic. It's all about bringing positive products to patients, improving patient access, improving efficiencies in the system. But it all comes back down to people, right? And from the same standpoint, people are vitally important to build these companies. Next slide. So as we look at these pictures, there's four masterpieces up here. We've got a romantic, we've got an impressionist. In Monet, we have the abstract impressionism with the Pollock, and then we have Alism. Now these are all considered masterpieces, but this is my youngest, is the Alism. That's actually probably only a masterpiece at our house. So in all seriousness, though, when you look at talent management, I mean, we could spend a whole hour just literally on talent management strategies and different aspects of that, depending on where a company's at in growth. So my hope is, I don't know which one of these paintings outside of my son's that you prefer. Of the other three, there's one I really like, one I'm okay with, and the other one doesn't really appeal to me at all. So my hope is, as I go through some of these points, that you'll look at it, whether you're a hiring manager, whether you're growing a company, or you're looking at it from your own career, you'll take certain aspects and can think about and creating better, improved best practices that'll benefit you. I look at everything relevant to why companies succeed and fail, and there's so much data over all industries, typically anywhere from 6 to 8 key areas on why companies succeed or fail. 50% of startups don't make it a year. Over half of them are not around at year 5, and over 70% of companies don't make it over 10 years. So when it comes to leadership, relevant to mission, vision, company alignment or misalignment, and then the right talent, those are always 4 key areas. And I personally would argue some of the other areas come back to those as well. So when you look at data and analytics, and Kelly just talked about this, relevant to GAMP, relevant to being able to make sure that your data is not only robust, but it's safe. But does a company respect data and analytics and understand where the market is going? Being able to make moves and adapt. There's a lot of examples where the pandemic showed companies that pivoted and did some interesting things. There's also companies that pivoted to do things they had never done before and then went out of business. So being able to adapt to changes is really important. AI is everywhere. In the age of the metaverse, companies that don't value data and analytics will be challenged to keep up with the companies that do, because digital optimization is being considered in every aspect, every functional area of running a business and improving efficiency. And what makes a new hire a failed hire? And there's a lot of different data around this, and separate data. It all really complements one another. But 53% of employees were considered to have a negative attitude. 46% of employees had immediate attendance problems. That's amazing. What is their motivation? 50% just didn't work well with others. And so how important is it to hire talent whose personal why matches the company mission and vision, who also has the intangible skills so that you have higher employee engagement, less wasted resources? Certainly onboarding and training tie into this. And we'll talk more about career ladders as well. This slide and data, it never ceases to amaze me, but the key thing here, first of all, I believe that the right people in the right seat on the bus that additionally fit your culture are every company's number one asset. But in terms of voluntary turnover, the data shows that annual voluntary turnover is 25% across all companies, all industries. Now that's remarkable. That means a quarter of the talent is walking out the door every single year. It's typically not the people that you want to walk out the door. Now, why do people leave companies voluntarily? Well, typically one of the main reasons it comes to leadership or disconnect with their leadership. Secondly, they do not they're doing work that they don't want to necessarily didn't want to do or didn't sign up to do when they came onto the company, and it's for a consistent period of time. And then additionally, they don't feel valued. And then the fourth reason, which 70% of a recent survey stated that at-risk employees left because they didn't feel like they had a career path. They didn't feel like they had an opportunity to grow unless they left the company. So understanding this and how this ties into hiring people that fit the culture, number one, and then number two, that they have an understanding of where their opportunity to grow is vitally important. I always say that if somebody's a 12 out of 10 technically, but they don't fit the culture, they're the smartest person in the room, they have low emotional intelligence, or don't play well with others, you shouldn't hire them. Likewise, if they don't have the right skill, but they do get along and they have great soft skills, you probably shouldn't hire them for that position. Next slide. Now, the cost to rehire is brutal. I mean, Jack Welch used to talk about at GE Healthcare that the cost of mishires, companies spent more on the cost of mishires than they did on annual corporate taxes, which is a huge saying. Anywhere from 4 to 15 times the cost to replace a position, depending on what is important there. So the cost of mishires are huge, particularly when you look at opportunity costs, onboarded, and wasted training. McKinsey did a pretty detailed study with a lot of data that, according to them, 50% of all hires were considered mishires over about an 18 to 20 month period. So as I say, oftentimes this will hurt you in more than one way. If you look at hiring, you look at talent, you look at your processes relevant to onboarding, annual employee appreciation programs, and the idea of career ladders. If you do it transactional, you'll get transactional, and it'll hurt you in more than one way. Technical versus cultural fit. So many companies don't do this well from my experience, or they try to do it all at the same time. But it is vitally important to delineate between the technical skill you're looking for in a position versus cultural fit. So hiring managers should be determining minimal skills needed for the role, and additionally evaluating emotional intelligence, temperament, and motivation separately. You'll see a lot of the data that we talk about relevant to mishires comes back to this. For companies and hiring managers, there's nuances to how you do this. We don't have time to go over this specifically in this particular presentation, but it's vitally important that you delineate that, and I'll give you a quick example. If you're hiring software engineers, there should be a minimal technical skill relevant to algorithm development, that you consistently capture that so you can compare and contrast talent and know on the technical side whether or not they hit that minimal technical skill. But there's also a way you customize your interview process to determine those other areas to make sure the cultural fit is there. And that starts with determining your values and then making mission, vision, and how you evaluate that a proactive part of your interview process. Just like your master validation files or design quality or submission, it can't be something that you do once and then you put it in a drawer. So reach out to us if you'd like to know more information about this. Leadership and accountability, I just think it's so vital. I believe that leadership is top down. Extreme ownership. We have a preferred library, so to speak, of reading here at SSI. So extreme ownership is our playbook for leadership and accountability to create efficiency and a culture that focuses on the attributes that we want, which is bringing solutions to our partners and problem solving versus finger pointing. And I think that a lot of the intangibles relevant to this particular book tie into what Kelly was talking about and what we've talked about previously relevant to culture and creating a culture of transparency and accountability, but also one that is not, an accusatory one. It's more about supporting and partnership. So Leadership IQ's data show that of the top 5 reasons for bad hires, only 11% were for technical aptitude or due to technical aptitude. So the person didn't actually have the skills that they were hired for. The other reasons, the other 89% were due to not being coachable. They had a poor temperament, so they didn't play nicely in the sandbox with their toys, low emotional intelligence, and poor motivation, which again ties into a lot of other information that surveys and data. That is remarkable. So once again, how important is it to understand what motivates somebody, what their personal why is, and how does that align with the company's value prop, their mission, and to hire people that are going to be able to grow with the company so that you have higher employee engagement and less wasted resources. I love the talent war. When you think about emerging markets in particular, any relevant talent is directly proportional to the size of the market. I'll talk about this a little bit more relevant to the subset of cell and gene therapy and pharma. There's going to be a huge need for talent in areas that hasn't necessarily existed relevant to the product categories. The talent war talks about strategies and identifying the minimal technical aptitude for any position and the minimum specificity of the experience that you want. And then after the candidate meets that threshold, focus on hiring for attitude, cultural fit, and the ability to grow. And understanding that if you're a hiring manager or the culture of your company, what that looks like relevant to vertical, horizontal, or how you look at crossover talent is a really important thing to understand from a leadership standpoint, as well as if you're a candidate looking at opportunities at companies. How will you fill positions? So this is vitally important. In terms of crossover skills, are you going to be open to crossover skills? Are you going to be open to candidates that are ready for the next step in their career versus somebody that has only done it at that level? Autonomy is a huge consideration and is not one that's going to go away after the pandemic. Or is your value prop and your leadership so amazing that people are going to cross the street and get to the back end of the line for the same amount of money or less? Or are you simply going to overpay? So really understanding what this looks like, how you're going to fill roles, and then how that ties into the company. Because once again, we've heard this multiple times in terms of risk and in terms of fines, and I'll touch on this again, a lot of the things that lead to companies failing come back to wrong talent, wrong leadership, or cutting corners, or not respecting regulatory pathways or quality. So one point here, the pharma industry grows at a CAGR of about 7.5% to 8.5% typically annually. So when you look at cell and gene therapy, with all of the clinical trials that are currently going on, projected to be well over 10 new products coming on the market by 2025, depending on whether you're looking at cell and gene or you're looking at therapeutics, they're growing anywhere from 35 to 60%. Where's that talent going to come from, particularly when you look at the commercial side of things where a lot of that talent doesn't specifically exist for those products? So understanding talent and what really matters relevant to cultural fit and what your values are at the company is going to be vitally important so that you have teams that work well together and you have less wasted resources and it leads to more sustainable, profitable growth, which just like having a culture of quality should be important to everybody. I believe career ladders are, and I've not seen a lot of companies do this well, but the ones that do it well, it's really a boon. It's better for leadership. It's better for every level of the company, and it's better for the customers as well. So when you look at FDA warning letters, the average fine is $5 million. And so when you look at teams that are overworked, when you look at it, we've already talked about 25% annual voluntary turnover. When people are leaving because they, bought onto a position that wasn't what they thought it was, or they came on and maybe there's some leadership issues there, or they don't fit the culture, those costs of mishires and annual voluntary turnover mean teams are overworked. When teams are overworked, it typically leads to more risk, and that lack of stability can come back, as I said earlier, and it can affect you in more ways than one. When you look at the industry overall, since 2010, the pharma industry has been fined over $50 billion in fees. So it is vitally important to understand that, again, from a risk standpoint, poor leadership, cutting corners, fraud, or poor talent in a particular seat can be a significant factor. Having career ladders allows you, if they're set at the C-suite level and then implemented, it allows people on your team to understand exactly what they need to do to grow their career, and typically opportunities to do it vertically or horizontally and it brings in their crossover skills and their ability to move into other areas. So it's a huge motivating factor to consider. Cakes versus pie. So I kind of try to dumb simple things down for myself. But when I look at cakes versus pies, I like to think about running a bakery and talent when it comes to crossover skills in particular. So if you're doing formulation development or MS&T, you need some pretty specific skills and experience, for example. The risk there is significant. However, in terms of looking at talent, think about past performance and intangibles, I would suggest, with your existing teams, and also when considering new hires coming in. Do they need to be a subject matter expert in every aspect of the role? You have to understand there has to be something in it for them, and you have to actually attract. You can't just interview people. So what crossover skills do they have? If somebody can make an incredible cake and they've never baked a pie, I would say that they most likely could probably learn to bake a pretty incredible pie. Regulatory affairs, I think, is a great example. Do you want them to be able to make, confections and special chocolates in the bakery? You want them to be a subject matter expert in every aspect of the submission? Or are you looking for someone that can lead stakeholders, has high emotional intelligence, they know what needs to go into the submission and where it needs to go, and they have that really strong ability to interact with the governing body appropriately and to de-escalate? I have witnessed so many different examples of companies missing out on really great talent because, in a sense, they miss the forest for the trees. I think the elephant in the room relative to autonomy, it's a significant thing to understand, and companies are going to have to take a position on it. Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank last year, he was talking about areas that he would not invest in, listed 4 states in the United States in particular because of increased regulation, the high cost of commercial space, and that it just didn't make sense. One of the things that caught my ears that he stated was that 40% of their talent at his companies, depending on their particular functional area, were remote with limited travel to the corporate office, and that he didn't see it going back. Now, with some roles, autonomy or hybrid, it's just not realistic. However, as artificial intelligence and digital optimization continue to create opportunities for increased efficiency, companies are going to need to look at autonomy, I believe, in a different light if you want to get top talent. People more than ever are looking for opportunities for autonomy. And as you look at the advances in technology, there are going to be more scenarios where that's created. Looking at supply and demand, this is just one scenario to hire a director of quality assurance and therapeutics in the Philadelphia area. If you looked at LinkedIn, there's 10 people that are actually open to work. 4 preferred in office, 5 preferred hybrid remote, and 1 completely remote. So next slide. If we look at this at a macro level, I think you really can't look at many things from a business standpoint, or if you're not looking at macro and micro. But across the United States, there were 2,300 positions listed for senior quality assurance leadership opportunities. There were 428 quality assurance senior leaders that were actually have their hands up open to work. You can pretty much count that whoever has their hand open up to work, barely 50% actually will respond, because in any of these formats, typically less than 20%. LinkedIn will tell you across any of theirs that 18% or less of any message gets a response. So if you're posting and praying, if you're transactional, it's not just about reaching people, which isn't easy, but you also have to be able to reach them in a way that they want to talk to you and then be able to attract. So you just really have to understand this from a supply and demand standpoint. In terms of this slide, I'd ask you to take a look at this picture of a quality management system and simply ask yourself, if your quality management system and your processes for hiring and training to bring on top talent match the quality management system for the product or service that your company provides, would that be a good thing or a bad thing? Unfortunately, in my corporate career, in the almost 9 years in talent management, too often it would not necessarily be a good thing. Shout out to my friend Bernie Haffey and his book Cutting Through, which is what we mirror our quality management system here at SSI. I think it is such an important thought process, but voice of the patient and clinician first. Great patient outcomes, whether that's as well as increased access or helping create efficiency in the system so we can use those dollars elsewhere. Next, followed by the voice of the employee. Create an incredible culture that's passionate about the voice of the patient and the clinician and those outcomes. Lastly, followed by voice of the stakeholder. If you get the first two right, the third will follow. Expectation versus reality. I think this is vitally important. And Rob did a great job of talking about companies looking for funding, looking to grow. A little over a third of the companies we partner with are A, B, or C funding. And so attraction and understanding what you need someone to do in the position and how that can change will directly impact your retention, which also ties back to annual voluntary turnover. Understanding crossover talent. And if you can't just think about a position, you can, but I would propose you can't just think about a position in a silo or what it is right now, because the market changes. And as compliance scenarios change, a skill, I would suggest looking at what those skills can do crossover wise versus just specific area, because companies that are going to grow are going to need people to move into different seats. And if you've already got somebody in house that fits the culture, giving them that opportunity to grow obviously is more economical and more efficient than going out and bringing new talent in. It's less risky as well because you already have that known commodity. Understanding the ability to grow vertically versus horizontally. If I'm a candidate and I'm going in, I really want to understand that. The last 5 things I did in starting this company, I'd never done before. So most people would not have given me an opportunity there. Hire for culture and people that want to grow. But really understanding how that position is going to evolve will help you increase your retention rates and avoid that annual voluntary turnover rate as well. I hope this brought you value. It's certainly an area that is, I think, important and I'm passionate about. So if we can help you in any of these areas relevant to attraction, relevant to customization, or we can share information that would support your processes, let us know. We'd love to do that.
Wow, those were 3 incredible presentation that touch different aspects of our industry. So I want to thank our 3 speakers, Robert, Darwin, and Kelly, for those amazing presentations. We are out of time, so we cannot answer your questions live, but feel free to add them right now to the Q&A, and you can expect an FAQ with all your questions answered. So please do that. So I want to remind you that you will get a recording of the session. You will also get certificates of attendance, those who stay with us throughout the session. And we also would like you to take your time and fill out the survey that should pop for you in the survey section. And this will help us bring you more incredible events. And on this note, I want to thank Qualio for co-organizing this event with Qualistory. It was an amazing journey. And now that we are finalizing the second day and looking forward to the third one, thank you very much for this. And the incredible audience, I wish you a good day, good evening, good night.